welcome everyone to Morning Magazine for this September 25th, 2019. And we are joined by Doug Machon from the Wood County Board and chairman with the Wood County Board. And of course, our friends from Wisconsin Rapids Media. Kevin, good morning to you, sir. And Doug, thanks a lot for joining us today. How are you?
I'm fine, James. Thanks for having me, as usual. Hi, Kevin. Yeah, it's a nice day. It's a great day to be here. Glad to be here.
Yeah, for those watching us today, they see a little different scenario here because we're in the prod room, our production room, I should say. And so that's kind of fun, a little different for everybody watching there. But it's a little fun for us, too, because when we get talking, Doug, I forget how much time we have. And I have to make sure to remember that for our sponsors and also for plenty of other reasons. But it's because you come with a lot of information and you come from a very unique perspective, I feel, where traditionally people in your age group, whatever, we don't always get a chance to hear from how you're feeling about developments, about the city, about things like that. You being a board member, not only do we get that perspective, but also the perspective that you're as passionate, as hungry as people in me and Kevin's age. And I don't mean to keep harping on the age thing here or anything. I want to give you credit on that because I really do admire it. I appreciate that. And I think that leads perfectly into what I'd like to bring up. And I understand you had a meeting last night, a really exciting meeting.
Yeah. And first of all, I appreciate your comments because I think excitement, for me, when I'm excited, I tend to percolate ideas. And when I percolate ideas, I get more excited, and so sometimes that enthusiasm can infect other people around me, and that's always exciting to see. But I did. I just came from a meeting actually with the. There's been a lot of talk about the utility scale solar development in the town of Saratoga. So I met with that representative of that developer this morning and to get some general information on the projected development. And some interesting details, some things I didn't know, some things I knew that were reiterated. But it was an interesting meeting. And Savion is going to be the developer. Savion, it's a company that's located in Kansas City, Missouri. Their point man is a guy named Drew Gibbons. He's out of Atlanta, Georgia, and that's who I met with. And we discussed some details of the development. And I think that tomorrow evening they will be presenting probably a lot of the same information that him and I discussed to a public meeting of the Saratoga Town Board. And a lot of interesting things. It's a 150 megawatt utility scale solar array, which is basically big enough to provide the electricity needs of 40,000 homes annually. So we're talking about one of the larger solar developments in the state of Wisconsin. Maybe, I think, perhaps, and don't quote me, but I would say it was probably maybe would be the second biggest one.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah, it would be very impactful in many ways to the county and especially the township.
Whenever I get a chance to talk with you, Doug, I like to talk about the economic plan for the area, the economic development of the area. This kind of leads into that a bit when we're talking about this subject.
Yeah, I think it does. I think that impactfully, there's probably three major things that you can talk about this type of a project having from a county perspective. And I think the simpler things are probably, well, not the simpler things, but probably the ancillary things of it, other than the basic financial impact to the county and township, which would be, I think, roughly for the county, we're looking at probably annual revenue of about $350,000. From the state utility fund, because basically that's a power plant, and so it would be looked at as that, and the money would come in lieu of property taxes. Right. They pay a fee to the state divvies up that money back to the counties and townships that own those or that have those facilities in place. Approximately, I think, $250,000 to the town. So it's nothing to sneeze at, especially from the town's perspective. That's a pretty good sum of money for a township. It's nothing that the county would reject, for sure. No. $350,000, a third of $1,000,000. I'll take that anytime you want to give it to me.
Definitely.
Especially when we don't have to provide any extraneous services. Yeah. We're not talking about providing extra fire protection. We're not doing any infrastructure works. We're not creating a TID to develop this thing. It's kind of a no-cost thing. for us that we get to develop some revenue off of.
That does not happen very often.
That doesn't happen.
Yeah, just period doesn't happen. Yeah.
Yeah, but the fact is, it could happen. We're a long ways from making it a done deal, but the prospects are exciting.
Right.
But besides that, just besides the initial fiscal impact to both the township and the county, we have other things that we wanted to talk about, as far as how they affect both of those municipalities, both of those governments. Workforce development is a piece that we certainly are interested in. As that industry grows, as the solar industry grows statewide, we're talking about an industry that's continuing to grow and create jobs statewide. So if we can bring in a workforce development piece of that, whether it be just the construction part of building a facility that big, we know Mid-State has a renewables program. Part of that is building the arrays. So if we can work that in, we've helped our county, we've helped our area as far as training workers that can go to other places and do this type of work, and we'll be fully trained.
One of the things that I've enjoyed so much, whether I'm talking with Sheriff Becker or I'm talking to Mayor Ruink or yourself, we're talking about a lot of things where we're not waiting for something to happen, we're reacting. We're not playing defense, we're playing offense. And this is something where we're looking ahead, and we're solar power, you're absolutely right, solar power is not going away. It is not one of those fringe kind of things that people are just kind of like, this is kind of neat for now, and it's going to go away like the pet rock or something. Yeah. This is going to be around for a long time, and it's the future. And people not only looking at the future, but taking care of the present at the same time by looking at the future.
Right.
And really, when we think about the kids that are in school right now, that are eventually going to be sitting on the board like you or yourself, or sitting behind a microphone like me, or anything like that, or behind a camera like Kev, they're something that we have to think of too, and that's an investment just as much.
Absolutely. Thanks for the great leading, because I'm going to use a line that I've kind of developed when it comes to this stuff. And I'm not saying that solar energy is the end-all, be-all. It's part of a solution. It's a good part of a solution.
Yes.
We're probably never going to get away from burning fossil fuels,
No.
so I'm not even going to go down that road.
Yeah.
There's a need for that in cases. We can't solve all the problems of solar, but we can solve a great deal of them. And when you talk about emerging and growing technologies, here's what I like to say. And those that know me best have probably heard this, but it gives me a chance to say it publicly, probably for the first time, and you may hear it a lot if you hear me talk anywhere. We can get on the train now. This is fast-moving technology. We can get on the train right now and get a really good seat, or we can get on the train later and get probably not a really good seat.
Yeah.
But you know what I say? To heck with both those ideas. Let's hijack the train and drive it.
Yeah, there you
That's
go.
what I want to do.
That's what I like. Yeah.
And I think that's where you get the most from that. When you look at what we're doing from a county perspective with our solar initiatives as well, those are ideas and that we want to see if they work. We're not saying they will or won't. We have a good indication that they probably will. There's enough evidence out there. There's enough empirical data around when it comes to expense reduction due to solar with energy.
Yeah.
Just the other day, I mean, do you know what we budget? I'll let you play a guessing game here. What we budget for electricity at the courthouse alone, that's one of our buildings, at the courthouse annually, what we budget for electricity.
I wouldn't even know what number to throw out.
Well, I'll give you one that'll probably shake you.
Yeah.
In $180,000. Now, if we could offset that cost by 45% or 50%, say, for the sake of argument, 50%,
Sure.
$90,000.
Eh.
For the county, and you're not generating that as revenue, but you're certainly recouping that in less expenses.
That it can go to other things.
Really.
That it's
Now
not-
you have to pay for systems and things like that. There's capital investment, but there is with a lot of things. But there's a defined return on investment that you can identify, and if you have those numbers and can make good decisions based on those numbers, it's kind of a, I hate to use the word because it's so cliche, no-brainer.
Yeah. Yeah.
You do what you can do.
It's so much too of I really love the train phrase you use there, because that is accurate. It's a great phrase, by the way. But it's also so many people we see in so many small cities, people not being behind. Essentially, or being on the wrong side of history in some ways when it comes to some of these things. And I'm really glad that you mentioned that about that we're not getting. nobody is talking about solar power like that's all we're going to be on in 20 years. I think the majority of us understand that we're not going to be able to get away from fossil fuels, and there's some importance to that too. Nobody is necessarily talking bad about that. It's just that, for instance, okay, if we're setting up a new building and we decided to run it on coal, that would not be a good idea.
No.
That would not be.
Well, then you bring in the public health. You bring that in the public health spectrum, and that's
Oh,
one
that's-
of,
yeah, that's
that's one
another
of the
thing.
things you have to consider when you talk about solar.
Yes.
When you talk about any clean energies, that's part of it. And so you're going to do what you can there from a public health perspective.
Right.
That's one of the ancillary effects of solar. There are so many. When we talk about this utility scale array, and we talk about workforce development, we also talk about education for the technology. There's going to be schools that are going to be interested in that, whether we do in that, how that works with workforce development, it can possibly, but just schools, grade schools, learning about the technology. Maybe you take it to a higher level. Maybe you develop high voltage engineers. Maybe you do some part of that through your local colleges or technical colleges or higher education facilities. Maybe parts of that become laboratories. Maybe the county sets up types of experimental things where we also recoup the fiscal benefits of it, but we can add to the data collection of whether or not they have value. I had a meeting with the Lieutenant Governor last week, and he's excited about what Wood County is proposing to do with their solar initiatives. I think that's very exciting when someone at that level takes an interest in what you're doing and thinks your ideas have some credence. That certainly gives you the enthusiasm to proceed. We don't have all the answers, but we're looking to get some answers, and we're going to keep looking for good answers for the county.
And I think we can all appreciate that that everybody involved in this and a number of the things we're talking about is being active, is being, not sitting there and just kind of saying, well, we have this issue, but woe is me, or something like that, or focusing on things that we've done in the past that haven't necessarily worked. So to be thinking forward, to be working this hard on these things is very, noteworthy.
Well, the fourth option is to watch the train go by.
Yeah.
And we certainly don't want to do that.
Well, and to piggyback off of that, we've talked about this before with, some years back, the Plover area blowing up a bit. We're talking a lot about Nakusa and the area in the Sand Valley stuff and that. Rapids is certainly looking at a big year in 2020. And there's all these areas around here are only getting stronger. And with that, we have to think bigger. We have to think about our energy. We have to think about our jobs and that sort of thing, because we want to keep that going. It's great that it's going that direction. We want to keep it going that direction. And so it involves a lot of the things that you're talking about here.
With any new technology, I don't know if this is applicable anymore, but I certainly hope it is. But when we talk about bringing a technology like this into the county, I think that from my perspective as a county board chair, my first thought is, if you bring this kind of technology into the county in one way or another, whether the county does it through what they do or whether you have a developer come in with a big project like this, you have some new technology, you have some minds that are centered on that technology. We talk about brain drains all the time. You and I have talked about brain drains. You have some people now in place that are going to have specific skill sets, a brain positive flow, a positive brain flow into the county. Then from a county perspective or from any governmental perspective, your next step should be, how do we retain those people? And not only that, but how do we bring in any ancillary technologies or industries or minds that can work with that technology and grow that mass? Take it from this to this. And that becomes part of the problem. And that all rolls in my mind, rolls into economic development. There's a lot of pieces that you can roll into economic development. It's finding where each one of those pieces fit in the big picture is the key. But there's a lot more to economic development than what I say is there's a lot more. It used to be traditional placemaking, and we've talked about that as well, and in my mind. Bike paths, lakes, waterfront, parks,
I was going to say
recreation,
parks, recreation.
those things. I think it's a little more than that now. I think it becomes somewhat, when you talk about emergency government after the storm went through. Those things start to enter your thinking. How are we prepared as a community? How does that relate to people that are looking at us as a community? How do they view us as a community? Are we prepared? Are we progressive in our thoughts as far as energy? So it becomes a little bit more about, or at least in part, philosophy and policy and public health. All those things play into placemaking. It's not as simple as nightlife and where can I ride my bike anymore. Although I'm not saying that those pieces aren't important.
Sure.
They are. But I think if you're going to do the total package, then you have to talk about everything.
Yeah, and you actually, it's interesting. You touched on something that I was going to lead into as far as the economic plan and development and talking about that. And something that you've mentioned before that I really appreciate is the idea. You know, I've always admired football coaches that can keep a pipeline in their state. We talk about this all the time with Wisconsin football and how they're able to bring in. They just always have a good offensive line, and that keeping those Wisconsin kids in this state. It's very similar to what you're talking about there, keeping people in their towns, in this area that are oftentimes in years past might have moved because of whether it's opportunity or there just wasn't a job in their field or what have you. We're seeing more and more people sticking around, people wanting to stay around and finding ways to stay around. Some of them even finding a career path that'll help them stay in the area.
Sure.
Have you noticed that too?
Yeah, that's a great analogy, and I think that's part of what you do when you talk about placemaking. And there's other elements of that are important. Rural broadband is a huge thing. I mean, it's not only Wood County, but it's across the state. We talk about it all the time. How we solve that problem. I heard the governor talk yesterday at the WCA annual meeting, and that's one of the topics he touched on. The state's ready to stick some real money into solving that problem. I think that's something that we maybe should have addressed a while back, but it certainly needs to be addressed. I think we realized that specifically in Wood County, we have to address that.
Yeah.
How we solve that problem, I don't know. It's not up to me.
Well,
I can certainly be a part of any conversation. I think the county board would definitely could possibly be parts of that conversation. But I think part of that is when you talk about economic development, you're no longer talking about specific communities. You don't talk about you talk about economic development in Wisconsin Rapids, but it doesn't end at the city limits. The things that can affect the economic development of Rapids may extend to Pittsfield. They may extend to Marshfield. The fact is you begin to talk about economic development in a regional tone, which is much more effective and which has to be done, because then you can collaborate with partners that have things to offer that you may not, and that you can offer things to that they may not have. And those relationships are what truly become the core of substantial and effective economic development.
That like-minded thinking is something that adds to all this, because you're right. There is no one magic bullet, one magic solution to any of this as far as keeping talent in or any of the things. You know, talking with some of our senators and congressmen about the firemen and the lack of that in rural areas and stuff. There's no one pure answer to it, but it involves a lot of like-minded people thinking and talking and working together, and that includes not just board members or business owners, but community members. You know, and that.
Absolutely. Well, and that's one of the things that we always haven't been good at, but I think we need to get better at, especially as it relates to economic development. I took part in an ATV county ATV trail ribbon cutting ceremony last Wednesday night in Pittsfield. It was our second one, actually, and I can't tell you the excitement around that stuff. And Pittsfield is a community that's really, if you watch Pittsfield right now, they're kind of a barometer. I think I like to think about them as a barometer as we view development, in particularly economic development in the county. They're doing some things out there, some different things. They're trying new things, which are probably, I would say, for Pittsfield, non-traditional.
Sure.
But they're one of the first communities that got on board with our ATVs on roadways, because they saw it as a piece for them to get people into the town. And I think they're very excited about it. And after we had the ribbon cutting, and we did that at our dedicated campsites in Dexter and Dexter Campground, That's where we did the ribbon cutting, and afterwards we had the opportunity to get in some wheelers and ride into Pittsville. And it was basically an all on-road route into Pittsville. Went very well. We had a group of some people, some distributors and some sales reps from the different producers and manufacturers. And one of the businesses in town wanted us to come there for, it happened to be Subway in Pittsville, and they were, anybody that goes into this, Subway on the ride gets a cookie, so I mean, I'm
Sure.
there.
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
there for
I've
sure.
been there too,
So,
yeah.
I actually had a sandwich too because I love Subway, but
Yeah.
the fact is, it was a really neat ride, and it was a beautiful evening.
Yeah.
And we're riding there, and on the way back, I got to actually drive one of these big UTVs, and I had never driven one myself, but I was amazed at how quiet the one I drove was, how comfortable it was on the roads, and I was purposely, when we got onto a gravel road out in the western part of the township, I was purposely trying to go through the roughest parts of the road, and the thing was riding great. It was like better than probably a car in many areas. They have long travel suspensions, but I was amazed. I'm starting to really think, wow, this really is. I always knew it had the ability to be something that would be dynamic, and I'm thinking, this is cool. I can envision strings of people coming from that campground, going into Pittsville, maybe eating, maybe returning, but also going into Jackson. It gives us a really direct link to Jackson County. Hopefully we develop that link to Adams County as well. Went to an ATV VIP ride at Syracuse a few weeks back, and holy cow, I can't tell you, there was a lot of people there, a lot of high-level state people there. What a great event. Promoting tourism through the use of ATVs, UTVs in the state. A big high dollar impact for many municipalities.
That's great to hear, and I imagine doing those kind of things, you get with your mind already a wildfire and active. It's got to get you going even more and thinking even more about some of these things and things for our own area here.
Yeah.
And Pittsville's a beautiful area. I've always liked that spot. I remember going for sports and going over there to high school to play or something like that. And be like, I like this area.
I used to bow hunt a lot out there. In fact, we went right past a place, a farm that I used to bow hunt quite a bit in my younger days. But yeah, it's a great piece. It's a really great piece for Wood County. I think we'll look to development. I was talking to Roland Hawk, in fact, at that meeting. He's basically getting weekly requests to open up new county roads.
That's great.
That people want opened up, which and we still have some work to do. But things have been going really good. I think that the bridge crossing at Nakusa has been very good. It's been very safe. The clubs are pretty much self-policing. They want to make sure that that gets done right.
Yeah.
That the travel in the streets. I mean, if you look at Nakusa is probably our biggest municipality that has road access for ATVs and UTVs. It's gone very well. Haven't heard any problems. My son happens to be a detective in Nakusa, and he said they haven't written a citation yet, and everything's going real well.
That's great to hear.
So yeah, and that's those are the type of things that are going to keep those opportunities intact.
Yeah. Doug, we were joking off air that our time goes by so quickly. I told you we had 23 some minutes, and it's more like 23 seconds. We've got a minute left.
Oh, holy cow.
It just burns right by
does.
when we get talking, and that's great. It's fun. I appreciate everything, all the conversation with you. But I did want to give you a chance if there was anything we didn't get to touch on, if there was something you wanted to mention or anything.
Well, we're working on the budget, so hopefully we'll have some final budget numbers for the county together very, very quickly here. Looking forward to the recommendations from the Renewables and Sustainables Committee going forward as far as Nepco Lake's concerned. We're looking at doing a small array there as a kind of a test facility to see how it works out. We know we can save some money there. We've been given some data, some analytics and we want to be able to showcase that a little bit. Also, I'd like to say hi to Carl. I know he's out there probably listening, so our best to Carl. And other than that, that's about all I have for you today.
Always appreciate the time, Doug. Thanks very much.
No problem. My pleasure.
I want to say a big thank you to Kevin and our friends at Wisconsin Rapids Community Media as well for joining us today. Thank you very much, guys. And again, Doug, we will talk soon.
Yep, you bet.
Speaking with Doug Machon from the Wood County Board, chair member with the Wood County Board, and we'll speak with him again soon. We have more coming up on Morning Magazine, AM 1320. This is WFHR.